The air hung thick and sweet with the scent of cut grass and cheap polyester robes. Thousands of faces blurred into a single expectant entity, all eyes fixed on the raised platform, on the podium gleaming under the harsh June sun. My dress felt too tight, the unfamiliar fabric clinging uncomfortably, a physical manifestation of the knot tightening in my stomach. Beside me, my son, Liam, sat tall and proud in his cap and gown, a beacon of everything good and pure in my world. My husband, Mark, was at the podium. He'd insisted on speaking, claiming it was his right as a major donor and, more importantly, as Liam's father, to share a few words of wisdom. I'd protested, remembering his last public speech at a company dinner, a rambling, self-aggrandizing mess that left me cringing. But he'd steamrolled over my objections, just as he always did. He cleared his throat, a microphone squealing briefly before settling into a low hum. His smile was wide, practiced, the kind he used on clients and potential investors, all charm and polished veneer, utterly devoid of genuine warmth. He started talking about dreams, about hard work, the usual platitudes rolled out on days like these. I felt a dull ache behind my eyes, the familiar fatigue of years spent listening to him pontificate, waiting for the moment I could politely tune out. Then he paused. His gaze swept over the crowd, lingering for a beat too long on a section near the front, off to my left. My breath hitched. I knew that section. That was where she sat.
Sarah.
His assistant, the woman whose name had started appearing on expense reports with alarming frequency, whose presence in his life felt less like professional support and more like a steadily encroaching shadow. A cold dread began to uncoil in my gut. He cleared his throat again, his voice softening, taking on a tone I hadn't heard directed at me in years, a kind of faux sincerity, a cultivated tenderness. Graduating today, he said, his words amplified, echoing across the field, isn't just a testament to the students' dedication. It's a testament to the support systems behind them. The parents, yes, but also the partners. The people who truly hold families together when times get tough. He paused again, letting the words hang in the air, thick and heavy. My hands were suddenly cold, clammy, resting on my lap. I felt a tremor run through Liam's leg pressed against mine under the seats. Mark's eyes, when they finally landed on me, were flat, almost triumphant. And I want to specifically acknowledge someone who, over the past few years, has been an absolute rock, he continued, his gaze now fixed firmly on Sarah in the crowd. Someone who has been there for me, for us, navigating challenges, offering unwavering support, and frankly, holding things together when they felt like they might fall apart. Her strength, her kindness, her partnership has been invaluable. He gestured slightly towards her section. I saw Sarah preen, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. The murmur started immediately, a low ripple of confused whispers spreading through the surrounding parents. People glanced from Mark on the stage to me in my seat, then back to Sarah. My ears were ringing, the blood roaring in my head. He hadn't just acknowledged her. He hadn't just thanked her. He had publicly elevated her role, framed her not as an employee, but as a vital pillar of our family, someone who held us together. In front of everyone. At our son's graduation. The betrayal didn't feel like a stab in the back. It felt like a bomb detonating in my chest, the concussive force ripping through me, leaving nothing but stunned, silent emptiness in its wake. My vision blurred at the edges. The world tilted. I heard my name whispered, a ripple of pity and shock passing through the rows. I wanted to scream, to leap onto that stage and drag him down, to expose the rot beneath his polished exterior. But I was frozen, a statue carved from ice and shame. My gaze found Liam's profile. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on his father, a raw, exposed hurt etched onto his young face. He had heard it too. Every word. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. The microphone squealed again as Mark adjusted it, basking in the uncomfortable silence he had created, mistaking shock for respect, or perhaps not caring either way. He was always like that. Oblivious to the emotional carnage he left in his wake, so long as he felt he was in control, making his statement. Our life before this moment hadn't been some idyllic dreamscape, not for a long time. It was more like a perfectly staged photograph, beautiful from a distance, but up close, you could see the cracks in the frame, the dust on the surface, the strained smiles. Mark had built a successful business, made a name for himself in the city. We lived in a beautiful house, drove nice cars, sent Liam to the best schools. From the outside, we were the picture of success, the envy of our friends. But inside the walls of that beautiful house, the air was often thin, suffocating. Mark's ambition consumed him. He worked late, traveled constantly. When he was home, he was often preoccupied, his mind miles away, already calculating his next move. Our conversations became transactional, scheduling, logistics, finances. The intimacy withered, not with a bang, but a slow, silent fade, like an old photograph left in the sun. I tried, for years. I kept the house running, raised Liam, nurtured his talents, attended his school events, celebrated his victories, soothed his scraped knees and broken hearts. I was the steady current beneath the choppy surface of our lives, making sure Liam had the stable, loving home he deserved, even if the marriage itself felt like a hollow shell. I told myself it was enough. Liam was happy, thriving. That was the most important thing. I buried the loneliness deep, pretending the distance between Mark and me was just a natural consequence of busy lives, of two people growing into different orbits. Then Sarah appeared. At first, she was just a name, an email address. Then she started showing up at company events, always a little too close to Mark, her laughter a little too loud, her hand lingering a little too long on his arm. I dismissed it. Mark was charming, charismatic. People gravitated towards him. It was probably innocent. My friends tried to warn me, subtle hints, raised eyebrows. I pushed back. I didn't want to see it. To see it would mean admitting the carefully constructed facade of my life was crumbling, and I wasn't ready for that. Liam was my focus. Getting him through school, preparing him for the future. I convinced myself that preserving the appearance of a stable family unit, at least until he was out on his own, was the priority. It was a truce I made with myself, a silent agreement to ignore the obvious, to walk around with blinders on, just a little while longer. But the public declaration at graduation, that wasn't just a crack. That was the entire wall collapsing. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't deniable. It was a deliberate, calculated act of public humiliation, an announcement to the world that he had moved on, and this woman, this assistant, was now his emotional cornerstone, the person who truly mattered. It felt like a carefully aimed shot, designed to inflict maximum pain, to strip away my dignity in the cruelest way possible. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of white robes and unfamiliar names. I sat there, numb, the applause and cheers sounding distant, like they were happening in another room. Liam walked across the stage when his name was called, accepted his diploma, shook hands. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Mark. His gaze was fixed straight ahead, his posture stiff, his face a mask of controlled emotion. My heart ached for him. This day, which should have been solely about his achievement, had been hijacked, tainted by his father's cruelty. Later, in the chaos of congratulations and proud parents, Mark approached us, a forced smile still plastered on his face, oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant, of the devastation he had wrought. He clapped Liam on the shoulder. "Great job, son," he said, his voice booming slightly. "Told you could do it." Liam flinched slightly at his touch. He turned, his eyes, usually so warm and open, now cold and hard, fixing on his father. "Did you really think?" Liam's voice was low, strained, barely audible over the surrounding chatter, but cutting through me like a knife. "That was appropriate? Today? Here?" Mark's smile faltered. "What? What are you talking about?" "I was just thanking someone who helped." "You were thanking your mistress," Liam stated flatly, his voice gaining strength, drawing the attention of nearby parents who fell silent, pretending not to listen but their eyes giving them away. At my graduation, you introduced your mistress as the person who held our family together. Do you have any idea what that sounds like? What you did? To Mom? To me? Mark's face flushed. He glanced around nervously. The circle of silence around us widened. This wasn't in his script. He was used to controlling the narrative, to spinning situations to his advantage. This raw, public confrontation from his own son, the boy he usually paraded as a symbol of his success, threw him completely off balance. "Liam, not here," Mark hissed, his earlier bonhomie replaced by a tight, angry edge. "We can discuss this later. You're overreacting. Overreacting." Liam's voice rose, ringing with righteous anger. He pulled off his cap, clutching it in his hand. "You just humiliated Mom in front of everyone we know. You've been cheating on her, on us, for God knows how long, and then you stand on a stage and give credit for our family's stability to the woman you're doing it with? What planet are you on?" His voice broke on the last word. Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them back fiercely. He was shaking with anger and hurt. My own carefully constructed composure shattered. I stepped forward, placing a hand on Liam's arm, a silent show of support, of solidarity. Mark visibly bristled. He straightened, regaining some of his arrogant posture. "This is precisely the kind of emotional instability I was referring to," he said, turning his gaze back to me, his voice cold and sharp. "Clearly, the pressure has gotten to you. Liam, your mother isn't well. We'll talk about this when she's more rational." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. He was trying to spin it, right there, in front of his son, in front of the eavesdropping crowd. He was trying to paint me as unstable, emotional, irrational. He was trying to seize control of the narrative, to twist my pain into a sign of my own weakness. A cold, hard anger settled deep within my bones, an antidote to the earlier shock and shame. He wasn't just betraying me, he was trying to dismantle me, to discredit me in the eyes of our son and our community. He was trying to win. Rational? My voice was quiet, dangerously so. I felt Liam's hand grip mine. "You call humiliating your wife and son at a public event rational, Mark? You call thanking your mistress for holding our family together rational?" "I think we've said enough," Mark said, his face a mask of polite concern, but his eyes were glinting with a warning. "Liam, we're leaving." He reached for Liam's arm, but my son pulled away sharply. "I'm not leaving with you," Liam said, his voice firm. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a love and loyalty that was a balm to my wounded soul. "I'm leaving with Mom." He turned his back on his father and walked away, cutting through the crowd, towards the exit. I stood there for a moment longer, looking at Mark. His face was a picture of stunned disbelief, quickly morphing into fury. He hadn't anticipated this. Not the public confrontation, not Liam's unwavering stand, not the collective gasp from the onlookers. He was used to being the one in control, the one dictating the terms. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of something other than arrogance in his eyes. Fear. I didn't say another word. I simply turned and followed my son, leaving Mark standing alone on the edge of the dispersing crowd, the silence around him now heavy with judgment. As I walked away, I felt the whispers follow me, no longer pitying, but curious, perhaps even respectful. I had stood my ground. Liam had stood his. We had survived the first volley. But I knew this was just the beginning. Mark wouldn't let this go. He had been publicly challenged, publicly shamed by his own family. His pride, his carefully constructed image, was shattered. He would retaliate. I needed a plan. The drive home was quiet. Liam sat beside me, staring out the window, the graduation cap resting on the dashboard between us. The silence wasn't awkward. It was companionable, a shared space of shock and unspoken understanding. He had seen. He had heard. And he had chosen. He had chosen me. That simple act of walking away with me, in front of everyone, felt like the most profound declaration of love and loyalty I had ever received. Back at the house, the silence stretched, thick with the day's events. The house felt different. It had always felt like Mark's house, reflecting his tastes, his success. Now it felt like a battleground. We sat in the living room, the setting sun casting long shadows. "Mom," Liam said, his voice soft, "are you okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't a child anymore. He was a man, navigating a world suddenly made complicated and painful by his father's actions. "I will be," I said, forcing a small smile. "Are you?" He shrugged, looking down at his hands. "It was messed up, Mom. Really messed up. I can't believe he did that." "I know," I whispered. "Neither can I." We talked then, not about the affair directly, but about the years of distance, the feeling that Mark was never fully present, the way he prioritized his work, his image, over everything else. Liam confessed he hadn't been entirely blindsided by his father's speech. He'd suspected things for a while, noticing Mark's late-night calls, his secretive texts, his unexplained absences. He'd kept quiet, not wanting to upset me, not wanting to admit that the father he admired was capable of such profound dishonesty. My heart broke a little more, knowing he had carried that burden alone. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying the scene at graduation, his cruel words, Sarah's smirk, Liam's pained face, Mark's subsequent fury. He wasn't just having an affair. He was using it, manipulating the situation. His comment about Sarah holding us together wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a carefully constructed phrase designed to publicly legitimize her place and, implicitly, undermine mine.
Why?
What was his angle? It wasn't just about leaving. People leave marriages all the time. This felt different. It felt strategic, calculated, like he was laying the groundwork for something else. I started digging. Quietly, discreetly. I didn't confront Mark when he finally came home late that night, reeking of alcohol and defiance. He tried to storm in, start a fight, demand an apology from Liam. I met him at the door, my face a blank mask, and told him Liam was asleep and he needed to leave. He sputtered, threatened, but the coldness in my eyes, the utter lack of fear or emotion, seemed to disarm him temporarily. He left, slamming the door, leaving a vacuum of silence and tension in his wake. My digging started with small things. Looking through old joint bank statements. Reviewing credit card bills, always separate for his business expenses. Checking property records. It was tedious, frustrating work. Most things seemed normal, albeit reflecting his increasingly extravagant spending. But then I found it. A series of transactions, small at first, then larger, involving shell companies with names I didn't recognize. Funds being moved, not into typical investments, but shuffled through complex structures, offshore accounts mentioned in buried documents I found in his home office. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about money. A lot of money. The pit in my stomach deepened. He wasn't just preparing to leave me, he was preparing to leave me with nothing, or next to nothing. He was systematically moving assets, hiding money, likely in anticipation of a divorce, planning to claim he had far less than he did, leaving me with a pittance while he sailed off into the sunset with Sarah and his hidden fortune. His public declaration at graduation suddenly clicked into place. It wasn't just humiliation, it was part of the strategy. By portraying me as emotionally unstable in front of witnesses, he could potentially use it later in court, claiming I wasn't a reliable witness, that my accusations were the product of a breakdown, not reality. He was poisoning the well. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a thief, a manipulator, a man willing to destroy his family's financial security for his own gain. The anger I felt before was a flickering candle compared to the inferno that now raged within me. This wasn't just about my broken heart or my public shame. It was about protecting my son's future, protecting what little stability we had left. I couldn't just lick my wounds and walk away with whatever crumbs he decided to leave me. I had to fight.
But how?
He was powerful, well-connected. He had lawyers, accountants, people who were used to burying secrets. I had nothing, just a growing pile of suspicious documents and a gnawing fear. I reached out to a friend, A woman I'd known for years, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer named Evelyn. We met for coffee, far from our usual haunts. I laid it all out, the affair, the graduation incident, the suspicious financial trail I was uncovering. Evelyn listened patiently, her expression hardening as I spoke. When I finished, the silence stretched for a long moment. "He's not just cheating on you," Evelyn said, her voice low and serious. "He's planning to screw you over financially. Big time. This isn't amateur hour. This is sophisticated asset hiding. He's been working on this for a while." My blood ran cold. "What can I do?" "You can't do this alone," she said. "You need forensic accountants, private investigators. And you need to be smart. He thinks you're broken, emotional. Use that. Let him underestimate you. Don't let him know you're onto the money." She advised me on the first steps. Secure my own finances, gather more evidence discreetly, consult with specialists. It felt overwhelming, like climbing a sheer cliff face with no equipment. But the thought of Mark succeeding, of him getting away with it, leaving me and Liam vulnerable, fueled a fierce, cold determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Liam, for his inheritance, for his future that Mark was trying to steal. The next few weeks were a blur of clandestine meetings, hushed phone calls, poring over complex financial statements late into the night after Liam had gone to bed. I felt like a spy in my own life, navigating a world of hidden transactions and legal jargon. Mark, emboldened by what he perceived as my silence and inaction, he hadn't heard from me or Liam since graduation, continued to escalate his passive-aggressive tactics. He would send emails, ostensibly about logistics or Liam, but laced with veiled jabs about my emotional state or how difficult things were making it for everyone. He was building his case, creating a false narrative. He also began to flaunt his relationship with Sarah more openly. They were seen together at restaurants we used to frequent, at charity events I would normally attend with him. It was another layer of provocation, another attempt to break me, to push me into a public display of distress that he could then use against me. It hurt, seeing them together, a fresh wave of pain washing over the lingering humiliation. But the anger and the strategic planning kept me grounded. I couldn't react. Not yet. I had to wait, watch, gather more information, build an ironclad case. The deeper I dug, the more layers of Mark's deceit I uncovered. The shell companies weren't just hiding money. They were involved in questionable business practices, skirting legal lines, maybe even crossing them. Sarah wasn't just his mistress. She was actively involved in some of these financial maneuvers, her name appearing on documents related to the offshore accounts. This wasn't just a sordid office romance. It was a partnership in potentially fraudulent activity. The stakes were even higher than I had initially imagined. One evening, Liam found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets and legal documents. He sat down beside me, his expression concerned. "Mom, what is all this?" I hesitated. I had been trying to shield him from the uglier aspects of the financial mess, focusing only on supporting him emotionally. But he was almost a man, and this affected his future directly. I took a deep breath and explained, as simply as I could, what I suspected Mark was doing. I showed him some of the documents, explained the movement of money, the hidden assets. He listened intently, his face growing pale, then hardening with anger. "He's trying to steal from us," he said, his voice low and incredulous. "He's trying to leave you with nothing. After everything you did for him, for us?" "Yes," I confirmed, the word a heavy stone in my mouth. "He is. We can't let him," Liam said, his eyes meeting mine, blazing with a fierce protectiveness. "We have to stop him." His support, his understanding, gave me renewed strength. We weren't just mother and son anymore. We were allies, co-conspirators against a common enemy. We started working together, Liam using his tech skills to help me organize files, research company names, track down online information related to Mark's business dealings and Sarah's involvement. He was smart, intuitive, and his perspective often helped me see things I had missed. The plan began to take shape, a dangerous, high-stakes gamble. We had the financial evidence, enough to raise serious questions, maybe even trigger investigations. We also had Mark's public behavior, his attempts to discredit me, his flaunting of the affair. We needed to connect the dots, expose not just the infidelity, but the calculated scheme behind it, and do it in a way that would completely blindside him, using his own arrogance and belief in his untouchability against him. The opportunity arose a few months later. Mark was being honored at a major business gala, a lavish event attended by the city's elite, potential investors, clients, and media. He had invited me, a perfunctory gesture, likely expecting me to decline or attend and maintain a frosty silence, further reinforcing his narrative of my unreasonableness. But Evelyn and I saw it differently. It was the perfect stage. A public platform where he felt most powerful, most in control. The kind of place where a carefully aimed truth bomb could have maximum impact. My dress that night felt like armor. Black, sleek, simple, unforgiving. My smile was polite, cool, impenetrable. I arrived alone, drawing quiet stares and whispers. Mark was already there, holding court, Sarah at his side, looking every bit the supportive partner. He saw me, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he recovered, offering a tight, polite nod. Sarah's expression was a mixture of smugness and curiosity. They clearly expected me to cower, to melt into the background, maybe leave early. They underestimated the fire that had been burning within me. Liam was there too, at a separate table with some family friends who had, blessedly, rallied around me. He looked sharp in his suit, his eyes meeting mine across the crowded room, a silent signal of readiness. Dinner was a blur of polite conversation and forced smiles. I exchanged pleasantries with people, maintaining my calm, detached demeanor. I wasn't the humiliated wife. I was a woman attending an event she was invited to, observing the proceedings with polite disinterest. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Their speculation was irrelevant. Then came the speeches. Various dignitaries praised Mark, lauded his achievements, his contributions. He beamed, soaking it all in, standing at the podium again, the familiar stage setting triggering a cold wave of memory. He gave his acceptance speech, full of the usual self-congratulatory rhetoric. He thanked his colleagues, his mentors, his support system. I held my breath. Would he dare mention Sarah again? He didn't. He'd learned his lesson about public specificity. But his gaze still lingered on her, a silent acknowledgement that didn't escape the notice of the discerning crowd. He ended his speech to polite applause, looking confident, victorious. He thought he had won. He thought he had weathered the storm I hadn't even created yet. The program wasn't over. There was a planned segment where key people were invited to share brief, personal anecdotes about Mark's impact. His business partner spoke, a longtime friend spoke. Then the host announced the final speaker. And finally, the host said, his voice ringing out, a few words from Mark's son Liam. A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Liam hadn't been on the official program distributed beforehand. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise, then quickly narrowing in suspicion as Liam walked purposefully towards the podium. This was not Mark's plan. This was our plan. Liam reached the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. He took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the room, finally settling on Mark. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The turning point. Thank you, Liam began, his voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. I'm here tonight not just as Mark's son, but as someone who has had a unique perspective on his life and his character. A nervous murmur spread through the room. Mark's smile was completely gone. He looked pale, his eyes darting from Liam to me, then back again. Sarah beside him looked equally unnerved. My father often talks about integrity, about hard work, about building something lasting, Liam continued, his voice gaining strength. He talks about the people who support him, who hold things together. He paused, letting those words hang in the air, a direct echo of his father's graduation speech. The room was now utterly silent, a collective intake of breath. At my high school graduation a few months ago, Liam went on, his voice clear and unwavering, My father chose that public stage to thank a woman he introduced as someone who had been holding our family together. He was referring to his mistress. A gasp rippled through the room, louder than any I had heard at the graduation. The carefully constructed facade of the evening shattered. People openly turned to look at Mark and Sarah, their faces a mixture of shock and scandalized fascination. Mark was on his feet, his face contorted with rage, starting to move towards the stage. "Liam, get down from there. What are you doing?" he roared, his voice raw and desperate, no longer amplified, but cutting through the silence nonetheless. But Liam didn't flinch. He stood taller, his gaze locked on his father. "I'm telling the truth, Dad," he said, his voice ringing with a quiet power that commanded attention. "The truth you tried to bury, the truth you tried to twist. You didn't just cheat on Mom. You didn't just humiliate her publicly. You used your affair, you used your mistress as a cover. A cover for something far worse." He paused again, letting the tension build to an almost unbearable level. Mark was frozen now, halfway between his table and the stage, surrounded by stunned silence. Sarah had buried her face in her hands. "Over the past few months," Liam said, turning his attention back to the audience, his voice unwavering, "my mother and I have uncovered a pattern of behavior that goes far beyond infidelity. My father, aided by the woman he's so publicly thanked, has been systematically moving assets, siphoning funds from his businesses, diverting money into offshore accounts and shell corporations. He wasn't just planning to leave my mother, he was planning to leave her destitute, after 30 years of supporting him, after she sacrificed everything for our family. This," Liam gestured around the opulent ballroom, "this wealth, this success you're celebrating tonight? A significant portion of it, the part he's been hiding, was built on a foundation of lies and theft, aimed at robbing his own family." He held up a thin file he had brought with him, just a few pages. "We have documents, bank records, corporate filings, emails. Evidence of a calculated plan to defraud my mother, and by extension, me, of our rightful share." He laid the file on the podium. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the weight of his words, the undeniable truth in his steady gaze. Mark looked like he had been struck by lightning. His face was ashen, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. His carefully constructed world, built on deceit and public image, was collapsing around him in real time. He wasn't just exposed as a cheater, he was exposed as a criminal, a man willing to steal from his own family. Liam's voice softened slightly, taking on a tone of profound disappointment, directed solely at his father. "You wanted to thank someone for holding things together?" "It wasn't her," he said, nodding toward Sarah. "It was Mom. She held our family together while you were tearing it apart. And she's still holding things together by making sure the truth comes out. This isn't just about a marriage ending, Dad. This is about who you are. And who you are is a liar and a thief." He stepped back from the podium, leaving the file lying there for everyone to see. He didn't look at Mark. He didn't look at the stunned faces in the crowd. He walked calmly down the steps and came straight to me. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly. He reached me and simply wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. The room erupted then, a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and the scraping of chairs as people began to move, to distance themselves from Mark. Security guards, alerted by the commotion, converged on the area. Mark stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and utter defeat. Sarah was scrambling away from their table, trying to disappear into the crowd. I held onto Liam, burying my face in his shoulder for a moment. The years of pain, of silence, of struggle, culminated in this single, explosive moment of truth. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about justice. It wasn't just about exposing the affair, it was about exposing the rot beneath the surface, the calculated cruelty I had discovered. Mark hadn't just been blindsided, he had been completely undone. His own son, the symbol of his success, had delivered the final, crushing blow, using the public stage Mark so loved to dismantle him piece by piece. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Mark. The gala was shut down. The file Liam left on the podium was quickly retrieved, likely by someone from the event organizing committee or a lawyer. News of the incident spread like wildfire, amplified by the sheer audacity of the public accusation and the location. The financial evidence Liam mentioned triggered immediate investigations. Mark's business relationships crumbled. Investors pulled out. Clients left. The facade of his success, built on hidden foundations, collapsed under the weight of the truth. Legal proceedings began, not just for divorce, but facing criminal charges related to the financial fraud. Sarah was also implicated, her involvement in the offshore schemes leading to her own legal troubles. For me, the initial feeling wasn't triumph. It was exhaustion. Profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The fight had taken its toll. But beneath the weariness was a hard, cold satisfaction. I hadn't just survived. I had fought back, not with tears and accusations, but with evidence and strategy. I hadn't just exposed his affair. I had exposed the calculating cruelty that underpinned it, the financial manipulation that was his real goal. I had protected my son's future, ensuring that Mark could not steal what was rightfully ours. The divorce was messy, protracted, but ultimately, the financial evidence was undeniable. Mark lost everything: his business, his reputation, his freedom. He faced jail time for the fraud. Sarah also faced consequences for her complicity. The universe, or perhaps just the determined actions of a mother and son, had delivered a harsh, unavoidable reckoning. Liam and I navigated the fallout together. Our bond, forged in the crucible of betrayal and shared struggle, was stronger than ever. He had seen me at my most vulnerable, and then at my most determined. I had seen him step up, face his father's darkness, and choose integrity. We talked, really talked, about everything: the past, the present, the uncertain future. We started to heal, slowly, painstakingly. The big house felt different now, quieter.
Meaning,
I began to rebuild, not just my finances but my life. It wasn't the life I had planned, the one I had built with Mark or thought I had built. It was something new, something I was creating on my own terms. There was pain, yes, the scars of betrayal ran deep. The memory of that day at graduation, his words, the public humiliation, would always be a part of my story. But it wasn't the ending. It was the catalyst. It was the moment I stopped being the wife who looked the other way and became the woman who fought back. I learned that true strength isn't about avoiding pain. It's about facing it, processing it, and using it to fuel your resilience. I learned that the most powerful armor isn't physical. It's integrity, truth, and the unwavering love between a mother and son. Mark had thought he could steal my future, leave me broken and alone. He was wrong. He had only succeeded in freeing me, in showing me the strength I never knew I had. Life isn't perfect now. There are still challenges, still moments of sadness. But there is also peace, a sense of hard-won freedom, and a quiet confidence in knowing that I faced the worst and came out the other side, not unscathed, but unbroken. Liam is thriving, building his own life, carrying the lessons learned from his father's failures and his mother's resilience. We are a family still, smaller, different, but stronger, bound not by obligation or pretense, but by love, truth, and the shared understanding of what it means to stand up for what is right, even when the cost feels impossibly high. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.